Once again, welcome to Driving Success Through Digital Transformation and Customer Experience. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you get a lot of value out of the session and enjoy the content, whether you're watching this live or on demand. In today's webinar, we hope you get insights into the latest trends in digital transformation and customer experience. Our discussion will cover how these elements are changing service delivery with a focus on the public sector. We aim to equip you with strategies and insights that enhance the customer journey and streamline service operations. And today, we're really privileged to have a special guest speaker, Martha Doris. Welcome, Martha. She's a renowned customer experience evangelist and founder of Doris Consulting International. She has over 3 decades of experience in government service, where she has applied customer experience principles to transform service delivery. She hosts the CX Tipping Point podcast and has founded the Service to the Citizen Awards program, recognizing those who have significantly improved citizen services. Martha will share her invaluable insights on integrating customer experience with digital transformation to enhance service delivery across various sectors. And to chat with Martha today, we have Nilofer Erdebil, founder and CEO of Spring to Innovation. She's a TEDx audio speaker, author of the international best-selling book Future Proofing by Design, and has dedicated her career to assisting organizations in achieving remarkable advancements through design thinking principles. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Nil.
Hi, welcome everybody, and welcome Martha. I'm so excited you're here with us. I know when you and I chat normally, our conversations go along and we're all over the place in terms of conversation. So I'll get started right away and maybe we can do a lot more organic conversation like we usually do. So maybe I could give you some time to share a little bit about your story and how you got involved in CX and a bit about the story of DCI.
Thanks, Nil. It's a real pleasure to be here. I've worked over the years with our Canadian friends while I was in the government. So it's exciting to be able to share what I've done in the government and since I retired 8.5 years ago with your community. So I spent 34 years at the U.S. General Services Administration, where I ran for about 15 years. I led an organization called the Office of Citizen Services.
And it's Martha. So for those that are in our Canadian audience, the general, that would be Treasury Board, our equivalent of Treasury Board.
Correct. And it's sort of the central organization that the main functions with GSA are setting up what you would call framework contracts, right? So we have called schedule contracts so that other agencies can use those contracts to buy products and services. They manage most of the federal buildings. They also run a lot of the technology space now through the technology transformation services. So it really, I'm proud of the agency that I worked for so many years because it really has the ability to transform the way people work with the government, they buy from the government, the future workplace through the public building service, and actually the way the public interacts with the government. So that's where I spent my entire federal career. And then as I started to say, I ran the Office of Citizen Services. So we focused on customer service for years and years. And actually the organization that I worked with, one part of it was the Federal Citizen Information Center. And that's probably a good 50 years old. And it started in the consumer information area. So they had a lot of experience at dealing with consumer issues when what was firstgov.gov was created, that later was renamed to USA.gov. So we ran USA.gov, the contact center, the federal government's portal, a lot of associated family of websites like Gobierno, or USA Gov, en Español is what it's called now. We had a kids.gov and a few other websites. We also had a contact center. And for years, we actually distributed publications from across the government through through GPO in Pueblo, Colorado, which was eventually made more online. But that's sort of the foundational pieces of it. And then over time, we started to build products and services that we would provide to other agencies across the government, so that we would build it once and it could be used many times across the government to enable different agencies to improve the way they delivered service. And about, I guess, the 2008 or 9 timeframe, I got a little, we had a website called howto.gov, and it was around, how to helping agencies. And the tagline was helping agencies improve the customer experience. And I was like, well, what is customer experience? I'd only heard customer service. So I started digging into it, and it was like, it just sucked me into the vortex of customer experience. And the more I learned about it, the more I understood or felt that it answered and filled in a lot of the gaps around the government that weren't being addressed at the time, including, understanding your customers and how do you set measures and how do you get feedback and all that. So I just kept learning more and more about it and tried to get GSA and our Office of Management and Budget, which is in Canada. Is that Treasury Board also? That
Yeah.
handles the money? Okay, so we have those separated, but the Office of Management and Budget, go ahead.
It is separated here too. Depends on
Okay.
what budget you're talking about too. Yeah.
So I tried to get them to adopt or embrace this business discipline of customer experience. And honestly, everybody thought I had 5 heads and I was speaking another language. And so I just kept trying to implement the different principles within our organization. And eventually, as we'll hear today, we have a president's management agenda, an executive order, some laws around customer experience, and more, coming along every day. But because I couldn't seem to get the adoption or people to really embrace it when I retired 8.5 years ago, I my whole life was going to be around improving the way the public interacts with government. And really the tagline for DCI is simplifying the lives of citizens through transformed government services. And so, and whether that's through helping companies interact with the government or whether it's helping the government directly, that was, I try to filter everything I do through that lens so that I don't get swept up in a lot of things that don't really, aren't aligned with the mission that I set out to do. So I started Doris Consulting International. I had worked years and years internationally, haven't done as much of it. So that's giving me a little credence here by being able to talk to Canadians. So when I thought about what I wanted to do, I kind of took a step back to say, why wouldn't the government embrace this? What was the holdup? It seemed so logical to me that why are we doing what we do in the government if it's not to deliver the best services that we can? I felt like people deserve the best services. And there's so many examples across both the US, Canada, other countries, right? Of, people not answering telephones or going on a website, not being able to find the information. And so there were so many different things that seemed just not acceptable actually to me. So I kind of put it in 3 buckets. And one was just sharing best practices, identifying the great successes in agencies and industry and sharing it across the different agencies and across government and industry, and then bringing like-minded people together. Because at that point, there were very few, this was like almost 9 years ago, very few people who were really in this customer experience space.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been talking about government online and e-government and, for 30 years, but there were always little pieces of it that didn't kind of materialize. But you didn't have this customer experience kind of focus. And it is a new discipline, even in the private sector, right? So
Yeah.
just creating some networks of people and bringing people, like-minded people together. And then I wanted to recognize people that were kind of unsung heroes, because you don't get a lot of people that are recognized for answering the phone or creating a social media program, or and some of the work that I did at GSA was things like enabling government agencies to adopt social media or cloud computing, or creating the search capability that agencies could put on their website, so that instead of everybody going out and buying it or using commercial search engines, we had a search engine. And that's how the original FirstGov was created, was a donated search capability. But I've always felt that the government needed to have their own ability to search government content only, to keep the algorithms from the commercial sector out of it sometimes. I'm not sure that I even, got everybody to agree with me on that, but it's when you have kids searching for content around, space, and they get, Martians and things that don't matter to a government, organization, it does, and you're subject to the algorithms, right, of the commercial sector.
Yeah.
So
And I have to say, it's the same here in Canada too, is 10 years ago, people weren't talking about customer experience or citizen experience. And in businesses as well, so much was focused on making sure that things inside the organization went really well, but they didn't have that outside in perspective.
right. It was all inside out, not outside in.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. I think we're in an experience culture now too.
Yes.
I think there is a lot of reasons, including the adoption of different, or the creation of consumer technology, right? And the expectations of the public. And of course, COVID really, gave us a leapfrog ahead in terms of the demands of the public.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
I love that. Yeah.
so one last thing, and then I'll turn it back to you. I wanted to mention that, so we started a newsletter, the Citizen Services newsletter, which everybody can, I try to pull content together around the world, throughout the US and around the world, events, technology that enables customer experience. And then as Fernando mentioned, the CX Tipping Point podcast, which you have been a guest on. And then we've done some customized events and just do consulting. So that's my story.
Yeah, I love it. And we will have links later on to the podcast as well as the newsletter too, so that you guys can sign up yourselves too. And it's been a pleasure getting to know you in terms of what you do and how you do it. And I think a huge part of what you also have is the Citizen to Service Awards program that recognizes the significant contributions to public service. And so for you, what do you feel like the impact has been for these awards on promoting CX practices within government agencies?
So the Service to the Citizen Awards, we're going into our 7th year, and of course, COVID happened right in the middle of it. So we started as a lunchtime event, and now we're a black tie Friday night event, and we have 400 people, which we've almost outgrown our space at this point. But I think by recognizing this year, I think we'll go over 1,000 people that we have recognized.
Amazing.
And people just weren't recognized for this kind of work, right?
Yeah.
We recognized the people that were inside out thinkers, not outside in thinkers.
Yeah.
And so what was the latest technology that had been implemented? Or honestly, the CIOs who, it was a business model, right? What CIOs did you want to get in the room so that you'd get sponsors to sponsor it? And I really wanted to recognize those unsung heroes, and actually through the process we get the stories and nominations, right? So we have a wealth of best practices from all of the award winners that we publish. So I think that helps to spread the word and examples. We bring some people on the podcast. We offer that to them when they get their
Their work.
acknowledgement or whatever, that they've been selected. And actually we just finished up informing or notifying everybody yesterday of the winners for this year, and they haven't even been announced publicly until probably like 2 weeks from now. They'll go out publicly, but you can look on the website and see all the stories, and they come on the podcast. And I think it brings just a different crowd of people in a room that, you didn't talk about. We also get videos from the winners that we capture on proud moments serving your customers. And those things are just, they just bring tears to your eyes because people are just so proud of the work that they do.
Yeah, so much great work being done in government, and people are so proud of it. And it is open to Canadian government as well too. So if you're listening in, you can apply next year. I think applications open up in the winter.
Like February time, February to like mid-April.
Yeah, and I've seen some of the videos out of it, and it's exceptional. And I think people are doing amazing work, and it's great to have them recognized. And
Well, and it's also, you know, I'm a big proponent of public servants since I spent so many years of my life and career in the public service, and don't believe that public servants get the credit that they deserve. And so it's really to give them some pride in being a public servant and actually to help change the culture, because some of the byproducts of this are agencies, and we do teams, right? So we have teams of like 100 or 200 people sometimes. Obviously, they don't all come to the event, but then they can be recognized within their agency to help improve the culture and show how valued they are for the work that they do.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes it so much more believable when people can also see others that have done it and how they've done it, and then
Right.
have a network of people to be able to talk to on, like you mentioned, the best practices and their shared experience. And I know right now we've been talking a lot about CX and customer experience. What's your definition and what's included in CX in the US government, and how do you differentiate? Maybe let's start there. What's your definition of CX? What's included in the US government? And then we'll have more conversations.
So it's really, and we have an official definition through one of our budget documents. I won't rattle off document numbers, you know, at this point, but it's really the perception of all interactions that you have with an agency or an organization. So if you think about the fact that you could, you know, go on a website and look for information, and you either, you know, you have a good experience or you don't, that's one customer service interaction. But if you don't get it, and then you have to pick up the phone, you have to find the number, you have to pick up the phone, call a contact center or email or chat with them, and let's just say you get an answer, but it's not the same as you saw on the website, or it's confusing. So it's really your perception after all of those interactions, and do you trust the government is doing what they can to actually help you solve the problems, the most pressing problems you have in your life. So it does bring in an emotional component to, you know, all of the different touch points that you have across your journey, from the time you need information or need to have a problem to solve that involves the government, and through and past, right? Like the transaction or the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about customer experience, but we also talk about other things like customer service, employee experience. How do you differentiate CX, customer service, and EX?
So I'll start with customer service versus customer experience. And while a lot of people look at me like, what is the big deal that you interchange these? And the big deal is, even in government procurements, right? If you go out and you say you're trying to improve customer service, but then you're asking for design capabilities and measures and, you know, things that are really about the end-to-end experience, people don't know like exactly what you're talking about. So the touch point, one single touch point, is really the service that you get from that touch point, and the user experience, the UX you have when you're interacting with that website or that contact center, or even when you go in person to a, you know, a facility. Customer experience is like I said, from the end to end, but you've got all those handoffs between those channels, which is where the big problems happen, right? Because you can have a great experience in one channel, and I believe we've talked about the, you know, the Under Armour story where somebody ordered something through a mobile app, and the mobile app was great, but they got the two out of the 4 pairs of shorts didn't fit. So they go to the storefront, another channel, to exchange them, and they can't exchange them. You can return them and you can buy new ones, but they didn't have the same stock and whatever. So the store said they would take care of it. And after, a couple of weeks of watching for your refund for the shorts that you returned and nothing comes, then you spend the next, month tracking down what happened to those shorts and where's my refund? And they're sitting in the back room at the Under Armour store. And so you can see where you had a great experience when you went in the store, and you even had a better experience when you originally ordered them. But overall, how much time did it cost you?
Absolutely, yeah. And it happens so often in the private sector as well too.
Mhm.
And so now it's just how do we make it simpler for folks that are interacting with the public sector to have that cross-channel interaction as seamlessly as possible, really. And that, like you said, the end-to-end component of is that customer experience. Do you work at all in employee experience?
So employee experience, it's really the same model, but it's applying the same concepts to your employees. And in some cases, employees is where you start, right? Because engaged employees are going to provide better services to the customers that your organization delivers to. So it is pretty commonly understood now that those two things fit hand in hand. And in some places, people are even starting to lump them together as total experience, right? So you're not sitting and like listing all the, I had a call this morning and I said, yeah, we got all the X's live in Texas, right? Like there's just so many X's now, but, and then to bring in the digital side of it, which applies to both employees and your external customers. And we really do have um, a digital first, public experience, like mantra, right? Like that's our priority. Our priority is digital first because it's cheaper. There's so many advantages to getting interactions. The public wants to interact with the government through digital channels. I
Yeah.
think some of the sort of, different opinions is whether contact centers count as a digital experience or not, which in my opinion, with all the capabilities within contact centers, they definitely do, and they're definitely part of that end-to-end experience. So, but they're really looking at how do you digitize as many services as possible. And where CX comes in is you don't need to just automate a bad experience or a bad process, right? Or a paper process. So how do you call Nil and get her to design an experience or a service that then can be automated in a more efficient and effective way that meets the needs of your end users, right? So things like understanding your customers and bringing them into the design process, and doing the research that you need and testing it along the way is how those two areas need to work together. Now we have one little twist, is that in the US, we have a law called the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act, which gave CIOs authority and responsibility to deliver digital services. And we also have chief customer officers within agencies. And so starting to get those communities to work together with the end user or the customer in mind and working backwards, I won't say it's a challenge. I think they're definitely maturing.
Yeah, I love that. And you did such a good job of explaining DX, the digital experience. And then we still have CX, we have EX, and DX is about bringing the EX and the CX together. And I know you have so much experience in the US government. How do you see customer experience included and implemented in different levels of government in the US?
Now, I think a real simple way to think about customer experience is it's about continuous improvement to meet the mission of the agency and meet the customer's needs. And
Love it.
so whether you're at the federal, state, or local level, you all have customers. And I'll also add, it's not just external customers, you have internal customers, which is, as we've talked about, employees sometimes are the internal customers for many of the organizations and the functions within an agency, whether it's your human resources department, your procurement, IT, finance, all of it. You really need to we're getting everybody into the act, right? Like you need to be improving the way you deliver services, because you can't deliver services to your external customers if you can't hire people or do contracts or know how to pay for it.
Yeah, that know how to pay for it is huge here for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh yeah. Here too.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we're talking about different levels of government too, municipal, state, and federal level, are they all putting in place chief customer experience officers? Can you talk a little bit about how that's being done?
So I haven't seen as many, I shouldn't say that. There are a few chief customer officers at the state level. I'm more familiar at the federal level, and we're probably approaching 20 chief customer experience officers
Yeah.
within federal agencies, but it's being implemented different in different agencies. So I'll take DHS, for example. They had a CIO who came from the digital services world and knew the importance of customer and digital experience. So he's created a customer experience directorate. And so he's bringing together, and if you think about the Department of Homeland Security and the number of people and functions that they have, it's bringing together both the CIOs and the CX people from all of those different operating components to actually create this directorate, and then they're sharing the best practices across that directorate. And the last month, we actually, coming out in about a week, I think it is, there's going to be a podcast from Dana Chisnell and Stephanie Moore, who are the executive directorate, or the executive director of that directorate, and a CX strategist.
Oh, I love that. That'll be fascinating to listen to.
I mean, one other thing, there's other agencies that are creating chief customer officers, like the VA has a chief veteran experience officer, and they report to the deputy secretary of the department. USDA has a chief customer officer that reports to the deputy secretary at USDA. GSA's chief customer officer reports to the deputy administrator. But there's lots of agencies that are creating these chief customer offices in the CIO's office.
Yeah, and it all depends on what the organization and the agency wants and needs, and how closely that experience is tied to the digital experience component of it. And honestly, customer experience is for everybody. It's not just one department that's responsible for it, but I love the fact that they're accentuating the importance of it by designating chief customer experiences. Now it's how well does it integrate with what's already in there too. I think that's the biggest challenge from what you had mentioned in previous conversations.
We have a woman here that was very big in the private sector and customer experience, Janine Bliss, and she always calls a chief customer officer human duct tape, right? The person who you really want to be kind of invisible, but make sure you're pulling from all the different organizations to meet the needs of the customer. Like, you have control of the data, or I shouldn't say even control, you understand the data, so you have the big picture so that you can continually have a pipeline of improvements that improve that customer experience.
That's so fascinating. And I love the duct tape analogy as well, too. And as we're talking about customer experience, could you share how the core principles of customer experience can be adapted to transform government service delivery a little bit more? Like, what are some common challenges when applying these principles in the public sector, and how do you capture some of the benefits of customer experience as well?
Well, there's numerous challenges, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when you go outside in and you start with the customer's needs and you start mapping the journeys that people go on and all the different departments that their, application goes through, people don't like it. You're in there, you're in their knickers. They like the way they've done it. They manage their contact center. They have their budget. They have their staff. They don't really want anybody getting in their business, right? They want to do it the way that they've always done it. So I think some of the challenges are around just having a customer focused culture and driving those service improvements, and not accepting the way you've always done it as good. I mean, you should think about, is that the service you want your mother, your father, yourself, your siblings, your kids, whatever, to have to experience? And if we're honest with each other, or with ourselves, then you can see that there's room for improvement. You also have to bring in feedback from actual customers,
Yeah.
because it's so easy when you're on the inside and you're working so hard to improve services, and it's hard, but you're doing the best you can, to just accept that that's all you can do. But if you get the feedback from outside, then you have some, evidence and justification for improving the way that you deliver services. And then there's all kinds of other challenges around. Right now, one of the things that we're focusing on in the US is designated life events.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, and I think the Canadians have done that in the past too. I don't know where you are now, but many agents or countries really have tried the life events, and for whatever reason, it didn't work. But, approaching retirement, or moving from military to civilian life, or, deaths in the family or whatever, how do you not have to contact 15 different agencies, when you have one of these important life events? And
Yeah.
that brings all kinds of challenges around. How do you fund cross-agency initiatives? How do you share data across different agencies? Because in many cases, we have laws about data sharing, and you can only share the data, or for an intended purpose, right? So you can't just arbitrarily share data.
Yeah.
And even, how do you staff it? We do have one program called recreation.gov, and it's been in place for quite a long time. And it's a great example um, uh, of how you bring together a lot of different organizations to create like a program office that manages things across the government. So resources is always an issue. Um, I was just talking to an agency yesterday, and it's like they have enough money, keep the trains on the track,
Yeah.
keep the operations going, and they have a limited amount of money. And how do you prioritize those improvements and determine which ones that you should take on and tackle? And some of it is, what is that future experience that you're trying to achieve, so that as you prioritize, you're putting money into things that go towards the the future experience, not sinking money into, it's like you have an old house and you want to renovate your kitchen. Are you going to buy all new appliances for the kitchen that you're going to renovate, that once you get the redesign, you're going to want to know what appliances you're going to buy?
Absolutely. Great points in there too. I know in the Canadian government, there is a lot of work being done on planning and prioritization right now. And one of the things that we talk a lot about in our deeper clarity method is bringing in that end user perspective, having alignment, as well as thinking about what is the future going to look like.
Right.
Because all the time we're designing solutions for the past challenges. Sometimes we'll be solving problems for today's world, but things are changing so much, and we have some insights into what might be happening in the near future. So bringing that insight in as you're designing and then delivering the services. You touched a little bit on customer experience culture. Would you be able to share some insights or experiences that you've had where, what are some things or best practices that have worked for enhancing customer experience culture?
So I think the VA is probably one of the best examples, and they started their veteran experience focus around 2015, when they had a burning platform of people trying to get registered for appointments in a medical center in Phoenix, and people actually died trying to get appointments. And so it blew sky high. And so they created a veteran experience office. They started out by looking at the way the private sector does experience. I will say, one of the challenges that we have had in the past of getting adoption of customer experience as a business discipline was, it was talked about like a Disney ride, and the government people couldn't really embrace, we're not like Disney, right? Like, people have to pay their taxes, people have to get their permits from here, people have to do this. So they didn't really buy into the whole warm and fuzzy part of it, which it's really about this much warm and fuzzy and about this much like hardcore data.
And
But the
yeah.
VA started an iCares program, and I don't remember. I mean, it's like integrity, and I don't even remember all of the acronyms for that. But and then you start training people. Even at TSA right now, they're training all of their their TSA agents in, and they did a whole demystifying customer experience. What is it? What isn't it? And then as an onboarding process. And so training is one of the ways to infuse, and having principles, customer focused principles and guidelines for the agency, that you use, and then you educate people on. In fact, I still have my CX principles from when I was at GSA sitting here on my desk. And it's like, these little cards that we gave everybody to show we'll take responsibility to provide an experience that exceeds expectations, engage with customers and each other, and listen to their needs and resolve issues, those kinds of things, so that you're constantly reiterating. And it's really a lot about leadership, walking the talk.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
showing it, and there's best practices around telling customer stories, and recognizing people for improving, customer experience. I probably could talk the whole rest of the time about a
Yeah,
customer focused culture. It's really about bringing the customer into the conversation in every step of the process, and infusing it into the DNA of an organization, not just, adding customer experience at the end of every sentence and pretending that you really do it.
yeah. And it's fascinating. You touched on multiple points. In the software development world that I came from, we have a phrase called "eat your own dog food,"
Yes.
and
I'm
and
familiar.
it's fascinating. I actually developed this leading edge technology with multiple vendors, put it out there, and a couple years later I moved departments and I had to use the solution that I had created, and I was like, wow, this is really hard now. And so that understanding things from that customer perspective, actually talking to them and understanding how they're going to be using it, is so invaluable. And then being able to ingrain that into the culture, so that as projects are being put forward, that people are thinking through, okay, who is the customer before we even start doing anything else. Let's talk to them. Let's understand them better at a deeper level. And we do a lot of work here too on customer experience work for public sector, and customer experience strategy as well too, for organizations that are a little bit newer to this. I know we don't have very much time. We probably will chat for another 5 minutes or so, and then I'll open it up for Q&A too. So if folks have questions that they have been waiting to ask, pop them into the Q&A section, and we'll make sure we're getting to those. I want to come back to one of the questions that I asked earlier, and I asked a whole bunch all at once. I'm sorry about that, because there's so much information that I think is really valuable for our audience. And one of them is around capturing the benefits of customer experience. And I know you and I chatted about that before too, is a lot of the time people do feel like customer experience is about the warm and fuzzy feeling, but there's a lot of efficiencies and effectiveness and impact that comes out of it. And when organizations put so much money into customer experience, it's really helpful for them to be able to measure that impact along the way, and then to be able to showcase it so that they can fund other projects going forward. And so for our audience, what are some best practices, and what would you say to those that need to or want to capture the benefits of customer experience?
I would say you hit the nail on the head in terms of the importance of it. And actually it starts as you're trying to do a business case for whatever improvements that you want to make, and thinking through, like, why do you want to, improve the experience, and what is the potential benefits. And we're looking at things like improvements in trust in using that service or the department that you're going to use. And what happens there is you increase adoption of those services, right? And in some cases, like the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, you're going to end up getting more revenue in, because people understand what you're trying to do. And when you think about like the underserved population, and being able to help people through that process. So trust and efficiencies, revenue, like what is the specifics around why you want to improve that service? And in some cases, things like consolidating contact centers, or in our digital services work that we do, and the memo that came out around delivering delivering digital first public experience. My brain froze. They have to look at an inventory of their of their websites, and do an inventory of the content so that you can deduplicate content so it's less confusing for the public. But it also, you can eliminate websites. And if you start eliminating duplicative websites across the government, you've got contracts that you're paying, you've got contractors that you're paying, you've got content management systems and web hosting and lots of efficiencies that you need to be thinking about. Challenges are, how do you define those costs and having a baseline to start with? Because at least in our situation, costs are, a website is, the CIO's office might run the back end and public affairs might run the front end, and they have people who run the content and people who are writing articles and doing, video or whatever. And then you got so how do you bring all that together to be able to actually tell your story from a holistic perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It has to be holistic. And earlier, you were talking about life events, and someone in the chat had mentioned that the UK has done really well in terms of life events. If there's a link that could be shared about the UK life events reference, that would be really amazing. And I know we have very little time, but one of the questions that I did want to get to for sure is, throughout your career, Martha, you've seen so many different types of transformations. Could you discuss particularly successful customer experience initiative you've been involved with and what made it successful?
Let me see. I actually tried to think about that question. What did I come up with?
Because I know, yeah,
Go
you
ahead.
have a lot of experience all over the place, and especially in contact centers as well, which is an area that is of big focus here as well too, and a lot of changes that have been happening in the technology as well, but it doesn't have to be around contact centers.
Well, I think, my time at GSA, we did a lot, and I'll say I was involved in it, but I had a great team of creative, innovative people. And so some of those transformations and things that we did had to do with just creating an environment and the resources and the tools and technologies so that agencies could actually move forward. Because transformation, like I said, I think it starts somewhat with culture and education and understanding. I mean, it's taken us, well, I've been retired almost 9 years, and we were just starting to think about human-centered design right before I left the government. And, we've created a couple of organizations within the US government. GSA has the 18F organization that was created back in 2014, because it's just 10 years old, and the USDS in the White House, which helped with the healthcare.gov. So from my standpoint, I think, this is minor, but when we had firstgov.gov, we renamed it to USA.gov. And it sounds like a really easy thing to do. But when you're sitting between the administrator of your agency and the White House, and they're like back and forth throwing things around, why would you even want to do that? And part of it was nobody knew what firstgov.gov was. And so why not give it a name of something that people could instinctively know exactly what it was and what it was used for? We've had created communities of practice across the agencies to bring together like-minded people, and the whole search capabilities and all those kinds of things as well. I did a project 5 or 6 years ago where we looked at the contact centers across all of USDA, and we recommended that you create like an Ask USDA contact center that brought together one place where you could pick up the 1-800 Ask USDA number and be able to call in and get information from across that organization. And I don't remember how many contact centers they had at the time, but you know what it's like to go on a government website and try to figure out, okay, do you call this number for that information and this number for that information? And honestly, if I had my way about it, GSA would be running 311 for all of the federal government, and you could call one number and they would be able to, and they would have content from all over the government. And,
Yeah.
but I have been pitching that concept for more years than I should admit.
Yeah, maybe some folks on our call can pick that up as well too. But yeah, that seamless integration and just one point of contact would be really helpful. I know we're running out of time, and we already have a couple of questions too that I want to get at. And if folks are interested in more information too about customer experience or other things related, feel free to write to us. Reach us through social media or right in the chat right now too. One of the first questions that we have in the Q&A is what sort of questions or input do you seek from the client experience on their expectations around cybersecurity and cyber response to threats, since there's so much in digital now in government and with personal information?
So I think the cybersecurity conversation is an important one, and I think the customer experience is where cybersecurity was 10 years ago. Which it was bolted on at the end, right? And now you bring the security people into the conversation up front, so you're building security into the services that you provide. So what you really need to do is bring the security people and the experienced people together up front, so that you're designing it in a way that you're ensuring security and privacy. At the same time, you're not overbuilding it to reduce the experience. Obviously, those two things kind of go hand in hand, but one, it's not a good experience if your information is breached by a federal agency. So sometimes you just have to live with the two-factor authentication and the way that they want to secure our information. And I think we all appreciate the fact that the government takes that seriously.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Is customer experience is going to be part of every project going forward, just as cybersecurity and also here accessibility is really huge too, is making sure that it's all integrated at the start and part of the strategy of each organization, so that it's not just one department or one part of the department that's responsible.
Well, under our digital first public experience, it really talks about, I didn't mention, but each agency is supposed to designate a lead for digital services as well in the agencies, which is just another person to kind of act on behalf of the CIO. But that whole implementation guidance is really a guidance to implement 21st century idea. And it's around accessibility, plain language, the use of search, security and privacy. Everything has to be a .gov or a .mil. Assessing your websites. It's 32 pages of directions and instructions on how to implement that.
I love that that's there, and for people to think about and consider as well too. There's one more question I wanted to get to is what do you think about change management practices and how they can be integrated with customer experience?
I think change management is one of the most important parts of it. I keep saying that this is really the most important part. And I think it's because it is such a different way of thinking about things. I mean, I don't know about in Canada, but we have systems that have been hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent, and you keep getting, bad experiences. And then when somebody finally takes a look at it, they never had a user even look at it or weren't involved in the design of it. And so, I mean, there's some very notable restarts or failures across the US government based on the fact that, that you didn't bring design or customer experience into it. And then once you decide you're going to go into all of this new way of operating, you're getting to the same thing. I mean, like I said, it's around continuous improvement to meet the needs of your mission. It's just that not everybody's going to buy into it, and they think it's a new fad or a new way of doing things. And so I don't know about in Canada, but we have a way of, stalling things until they kind of run out of steam. And so that's been one of my jobs over the past 15 years is persistence, right? Like not giving up on this.
Yeah.
And so I think change management and being able to understand as you're bringing customer experience into an organization or an agency and identifying the people who understand it, buy in on it, training them, demystifying it, all of those things, in order to continue to get adoption.
Yeah, I love that. And I always talk about change management and design thinking or human-centered design as the people aspect of organizations, and then project management and lean is about the organization itself and the technical aspects of it. It's not one or the other, it's all of them, and knowing when to use which one. And I think that's something that we spend a lot of time working with our clients on, is helping them understand how design thinking and human-centered design and then now deeper clarity fits in with everything else, because at the end of the day, this is the new way of working. And so it's how do we bring people in to be able to do it? And it's private and public sector. I think private sector is recognizing it as well too, because they have had many, there's been many companies that I've worked with or for that have put out products and services and haven't done enough research and gotten enough input from their customers. And so I think we're going to see it more and more and more. And I know a lot of agencies in the Canadian federal government, at least, are putting more focus on that human-centered design aspect of it. And some organizations are coming out with the customer experience and customer experience strategies. There's so many things that are all related to one another. And I think one of the challenges is understanding where you want to focus in on, what you want to prioritize, what you have the funding and the resources for, and having that culture start to shift as early as possible, like you mentioned, and using the right terminology as well. Sometimes that goes a long way too, in terms of helping people feel comfortable with bringing in better customer experiences.
I agree with you 100% on the terminology, because I think, IT people have a certain language that they use and CX people have different language, and sometimes they're talking about the same thing, but they're not really sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I have so many more questions for you, and I am so sorry, but we are out of time. If folks have more questions for me or for Martha, feel free to reach out to us again. And if you want more information on deeper clarity or human-centered design, I know Fernanda and Osa have been putting some links into the chat, and they'll be on the notes here. But feel free to reach out, and hopefully, Martha, we can continue this conversation, because there's so many more things that I wanted to chat with you about. And I know when you and I chat personally too, conversations last multiple hours. So it's amazing to see there's so many parallels with US and Canada. And in some areas, US is further ahead, in some areas, Canada is further ahead. But maybe another time, another conversation, we'll chat more about that too.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on it. And I would just close by saying we're doing a lot of highlighting and focusing on this because we have a president's management agenda and executive order, but we have a long way to go. And so it's just incremental baby steps.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Martha. And looking forward to chatting again. And for those that are online, you'll get the recording in about a week if you want to rewatch it. And again, feel free to reach out. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.